Mother's Day morning started like a dream. Soft light coming through the curtains, the smell of cinnamon toast floating in, and then the sound of little feet racing down the hallway. Sophie burst in, all sunshine and messy curls, carrying a tray with breakfast wobbling in her tiny hands, scrambled eggs, orange juice, and a daisy in a juice glass. Right next to it, her handmade card. Thomas was behind her, watching quietly, and I thought for a second that life was exactly where it should be. Sophie climbed into bed and threw her arms around me. "Happy Mother's Day, Mommy," she sang, eyes wide with excitement. I kissed the top of her head, laughing, and picked up the card. I expected hearts and flowers and a crooked drawing of the three of us. But what I saw pulled the breath right from my lungs. Written in bright purple crayon, "Happy Mother's Day, Maria. You are the best." Signed, proudly, in Sophie's handwriting. I didn't move. I couldn't. I kept my voice gentle. "Sweetheart, who's Maria?" Sophie looked up at me with all the innocence in the world. "That's who Daddy told me to write it for first," she said. But then he said never mind. My chest went tight. My hands went cold. I smiled and nodded like everything was fine. But inside, something cracked. Quietly, precisely. And just like that, Mother's Day became a puzzle. And I already had the first piece. I went through the motions. Smiled at Sophie, thanked Thomas, even managed to take a bite of those 2 salty eggs. But inside, everything had shifted. Like the floor beneath me wasn't quite solid anymore. I watched him from across the tray, how he avoided my eyes, how his smile didn't quite reach. He kissed my cheek, said he needed to check an email before brunch, and left the room. I just sat there, holding the card like it was made of glass and betrayal all at once. Maria. The name pulsed in my mind like a bruise I couldn't stop pressing. It wasn't just a mistake. Kids don't make up names. They repeat what they're told. And I knew my daughter's handwriting. Knew that Thomas had helped her spell it. It wasn't just a slip. It was a signal. And now that I'd seen it, I couldn't unsee it. Something had happened. And he didn't think I'd ever know. But I did. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even shake. Instead, my mind snapped awake like a door creaking open in a quiet house. I started remembering things, phrases, absences, a cologne I didn't buy. This wasn't the first clue, just the first I couldn't ignore. And if that card had slipped through, what else had? Later that morning, while Sophie played in the living room and Thomas took a suspiciously long shower, I sat at the kitchen table with that card in front of me. I ran my fingers over the crayon letters, thick, innocent, damning. My coffee went cold while I thought, not just about Maria, but about how calm I felt. Not numb, clear. Like something inside me had stopped begging for honesty and started calculating instead. I thought about all the quiet sacrifices I'd made, nights I stayed up with Sophie while he worked late, birthdays I planned alone, the times I brushed off gut feelings as paranoia. I thought about the woman he was with. Did she know about me? About our daughter? Had she ever sat in this kitchen, smiled in my direction, worn her hair neat to impress my husband? The thought should have made me fall apart. But I didn't, because I knew one thing with absolute certainty. If he could hand me a lie wrapped in a holiday, I could hand him the truth, tied in a bow. Not today, not yet. But when the time was right, he would wish that card had never left our daughter's hand. I didn't confront him. Not that day. Not the next. I smiled when he made coffee, laughed when he retold a story I'd heard 100 times, and let him kiss my forehead like nothing had changed. But everything had. I became someone else. Quieter. More careful. I watched him, noted his habits, the way he guarded his phone like it held state secrets. I let him believe I was still asleep, still soft. But I wasn't. One afternoon, while he ran out to get groceries, I went looking. It wasn't dramatic, just methodical. I started with his email on the shared laptop, notifications he thought he deleted, flights he never told me about, an Uber to a hotel on a Wednesday night when he'd said he had a team dinner. The pieces weren't scattered. They were just tucked away, waiting for someone to stop pretending they didn't see them. I saw them now. And the worst part? It wasn't even hard. I opened the center console in his car, and there it was. A second phone, cheap and dirty-looking, like the kind used for drug deals or dirty secrets. Locked, of course. But I didn't need the messages. Just the existence of that phone was enough. Enough to confirm what I'd started to suspect. Enough to prove Maria wasn't just a name in a card. Her name came up in his inbox, buried in a forwarded meeting invite. Maria L. No last name spelled out, just the initial, like she was trying not to leave footprints. But I knew. She worked with him. I remembered her vaguely from a Christmas party 2 years back. Tall, polished, too eager to laugh at his jokes. At the time, I brushed it off. Now? Now I saw it differently. Her hand had been reaching into my life for longer than I realized. I started piecing it together like a mosaic built from betrayal. There were receipts, wine bars we'd never visited together, gifts I never received. I found a photo of our backyard from a strange angle, sent from her email to his. That was the one that made my stomach twist. She had been in my home, while Sophie napped in the next room. While I was out picking up groceries, folding laundry, trusting. The audacity didn't just sting, it scorched. But I didn't scream. I didn't call her. I didn't cry to my mother. Instead, I poured myself a glass of wine, sat down at the kitchen counter, and started a new note in my phone. Operation Mother's Day. Because if he was bold enough to plant her in my life, I'd be bold enough to show them both just how deep roots can burn. I watched them differently after that. Thomas, with his carefully measured lies, and Sophie, with her honest little heart caught in the middle. That's what hurt the most. Not just that he cheated, but that he used our daughter to deliver his mess. That card wasn't just a slip. It was a wound with glitter glued around the edges. But instead of bleeding, I studied. Every late text, every rushed shower, every work meeting that didn't quite add up, I logged it all. At night, I lay next to him, my body still, my mind racing. The irony wasn't lost on me, how I'd once memorized his laugh, his scent, his warmth. And now I was memorizing his inconsistencies, his tells, the signs of someone playing house while building another life just beyond the walls of mine. And yet, I never let it show. Not once. Because what I was planning needed patience, timing, precision. He gave me deception dressed as devotion. I'd give him clarity he'd never forget. And as for Maria, she walked into my home thinking she was unseen. But I saw her now. And soon, everyone else would too. I started planning the dinner the very next morning. Not a dramatic confrontation, not a shouting match. No, I wanted elegance. I wanted memory. Something that would echo. I told Thomas I wanted to host a Mother's Day dinner. Just something small. Family, a few close friends, maybe even some of his coworkers. He smiled like it was sweet. Said, "You deserve it, babe." I smiled back, thinking, "You have no idea what I deserve." I made lists, menus, decorations, seating arrangements, but behind each checklist was something sharper. I created a fake email, sent a formal invitation to Maria, posed as the office assistant, said it was a surprise celebration in my honor, and that attendance would reflect well on her team spirit. I knew she'd come. Women like her never turn down a chance to be admired, or to feel like they've won. And that made me certain she wouldn't see this coming. Meanwhile, I met with a lawyer. Nothing loud, just a lunch downtown. I smiled as I handed over every document he needed. Bank statements, mortgage details, even a timeline of behavior. He said, "You've done your homework." I said, "I'm a mother. We don't sleep, we prepare." And prepare I did. While Thomas scrolled through his phone and pretended to be busy, I was quietly building a stage. I arranged for a slideshow, told everyone it would be a sweet little montage of motherhood through the years. "You'll love it," I told him one night while he chewed dinner and barely looked up. "It'll remind us how far we've come." He nodded, clueless. Every lie he'd told me had softened my voice into velvet. Every secret gave me more reason to smile. I carefully curated the images. The first few were genuine. Sophie's first bath, her first steps, me and her baking cookies in matching aprons. The kind of stuff that made people tear up and say, "Aw." But woven in, like a thread meant to unravel everything, were the truth bombs. The card, the text screenshots, the photo of him and Maria outside that hotel, arms around each other like a couple in a Hallmark movie. It was all there, already. And I still kissed him goodnight, still folded his shirts, still asked about his day. He thought I was healing, maybe even blooming. And in a way, I was. But not for him, not for us, for the version of me that refused to be fooled again. I didn't hate him, not in the way people expect. What I felt was colder than that, cleaner, like I'd finally rinsed the fog from the mirror and could see the truth. About him, about us, about how easy it was to fall asleep in a life that wasn't real. He thought I was just a wife, just a mother. But he forgot one thing. I was also watching. And I knew how to turn a wound into a weapon without ever raising my voice. Behind every detail of the dinner, I hid intention. The seating chart placed Maria 2 chairs down from me, just far enough to feel safe, just close enough to feel the blast. I even picked her wine, Sauvignon Blanc, the same bottle she and Thomas had ordered at that hotel, according to the receipt I'd found. I wondered if she'd taste the irony. I hoped she would. I hoped she'd savor it just long enough to realize what was coming. The night was set, the guests confirmed. The slideshow was saved under a name only I recognized, for the woman who forgot I exist. He walked around the house that week like everything was fine, and I let him, because the show was about to begin. The house looked beautiful that evening, candles flickering, soft jazz playing, wine glasses lined up like soldiers. I wore a soft pink dress, the one he always said made me look effortlessly elegant. Sophie was with my sister for the night. I didn't want her anywhere near what was about to unfold. Guests trickled in, laughing, hugging, handing me flowers. Thomas moved around the room like a proud husband. And then she walked in. Maria. She wore a navy sheath dress, heels too high for the tile, and a smile so cautious it was almost guilty. I greeted her like she was just another colleague. Her eyes flicked nervously around the room, probably searching for clues, but I offered none. Only warmth, only grace. She had no idea she'd been seated at the table I set for truth. No idea her undoing would arrive between salad and dessert. She clinked glasses with Thomas. I watched. And I waited. Dinner was loud and lovely, on the surface. But every compliment felt like static in my ears. I watched him laugh too loud, touch her wrist too long. I watched her steal glances, adjusting her napkin like it might hide her shame. And just as the plates were cleared, I stood up, smiling. I tapped my glass gently. The room quieted like someone had pressed pause. "Before dessert," I began, "I just wanted to say a few words." I felt the weight of every eye, some glazed with wine, some already misting with emotion. "Being a mother has been the greatest gift of my life," I said, steady and warm. "Not just for the joy, it's also taught me things I never expected to learn." Thomas smiled, unaware. Maria tilted her head, sensing something shift. I reached for the remote I had placed beside the floral centerpiece. So tonight, I continued, I put together a little slideshow, a tribute to the beauty of motherhood, to truth, and to the moments that make us who we are. A few guests sighed, already charmed. I clicked the remote. The projector blinked to life. The first photo appeared, me cradling Sophie as a newborn, exhausted and glowing. Soft music played. There were murmurs of awe around the table. Thomas leaned back, relaxed. Slide 2. Sophie's first steps in our old living room. Slide 3. Her in a Halloween costume, grinning wide. And then, Slide 4. A scan of the card. Happy Mother's Day, Maria. Silence. A sharp inhale from someone near the back. Thomas shifted in his chair. Slide 5 hit harder. A screen capture of a message thread. His name, her name. Their words. Intimate. Shameless. Familiar. Slide 6 was a hotel receipt. Dated. Time-stamped. Room number highlighted. Slide 7? A photo of them. Arm in arm. Unaware of the camera. Too wrapped up in each other to notice the world around them. The room didn't breathe. A fork dropped. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Maria's face went paper white. Thomas looked like he'd been slapped without warning. I turned toward them slowly. He stared at the screen like it might rearrange itself. Maria didn't dare look at me, her wine glass frozen in her grip. "Thank you all for coming," I said, calm as ever. "It's meant so much to share this journey of motherhood with people I love." I paused, then looked directly at Thomas. "And as for you, happy Father's Day in advance. You'll be celebrating it from a distance." That's when I finally sat down. No one moved. Someone cleared their throat. A chair scraped against tile. Maria stood up too fast and almost tripped on her heel. Thomas opened his mouth, but no words came. I picked up my wine glass, took a small sip, and smiled. Because everything I needed to say had already been said. He left that night with nothing but his keys and a stunned expression. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I simply handed him the envelope from my lawyer and told him, "The rest will come through official channels." He didn't fight. He didn't even speak. Just stood in the doorway for a moment like he was waiting for a different version of me to show up. But she was gone. The woman who forgave everything, who doubted herself, who accepted crumbs. That woman no longer lived here. The divorce moved quickly. When you plan in silence, you move in strength. Maria didn't last long at the company. Word got around. Not because I told anyone. I didn't have to. The story told itself. People noticed the details. How she never met my eyes. How Thomas avoided questions. How I smiled without bitterness. I wasn't a victim. I was the woman who saw through it and responded with grace sharp enough to cut through bone. Friends called me brave. Family called me brilliant. But what mattered most was how Sophie looked at me. With trust. With warmth. As if, even though something had shifted, she knew I had never left her side. I took time to rebuild. Not just our home, but myself. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about returning to the woman I used to be before I lowered my standards in the name of love. I painted Sophie's room the soft lavender she'd been asking for. I took her to the park on weekdays, just because. We danced in the kitchen to silly music. We lit candles at dinner even when it was just the two of us. There was peace again. Real, earned peace. One night, weeks later, she asked me, "Mommy, is Daddy coming back?" I didn't lie. I didn't twist it into a fairy tale. I took a deep breath and said, "No, sweetheart. He made choices that weren't kind to us." And sometimes when people choose the wrong things, they lose the right to stay. Her eyes searched mine, not afraid, just curious. Then she nodded, snuggled close, and whispered, I'm glad I wrote you the card. I almost cried, but I held her instead. Tight, steady, strong. Because that tiny, accidental mistake, that one wrong name scrawled in crayon, it led us here. To truth. To quiet. To a better version of forever. That night, after Sophie drifted off to sleep, I stood by her door a little longer than usual. The hallway was quiet. Our home was quiet. But it was the kind of silence that heals, not the kind that hides secrets. I walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water and looked around. Same house, same furniture. But everything felt different. Not because he was gone, because I was finally back, present, whole, undistracted. I've told this story to a few women, quietly, over coffee, or whispered between soft laughs and shared understanding. They always lean in a little closer when I get to the part about the card. A child's handwriting? They say. That's how you found out? I nod, because sometimes the truth doesn't arrive in a dramatic scene. Sometimes it shows up in purple crayon, carried by the hand of someone who loves you the most. One wrong name. That's all it took. One name meant for another, gave me every answer I needed. And now, when I hear Sophie call me Mommy, I know she's saying it to the right woman.